First of all, my name's Tom Dillander. I'm going to be the moderator, even though the paperwork says the moderator is Bill Hyman. Bill's mother passed away Monday, last Monday, and so they've got a lot of things going on. Originally, it was supposed to be Dick Henschel and myself doing the session, and Vicki has some fairly serious health issues, and she's going through starting radiation treatments this week. So let's keep her in our prayers. Anyway, I guess I'm going to solo fly this thing, so we'll get into it. It says that it's actually supposed to be about equipment quirks, tools of the trade, so to speak, for sound. And it's going to be more of a question and answer session in terms of sound advice. I'll give you my experiences, and then you can give me your experiences, and we'll just share them with everybody. But first of all, I want to tell you a little story. It's probably, it's about a caller. We'll call him TJ for the fun of it. And TJ shows up at the dance about 7:55. Dance starts at 8. Climbs out of his car. He's finishing off 2 jumbo hot dogs that he got at the 7-Eleven. He's got this big gulp in his hand, and he's trying to finish it. Reaches in the back seat to grab his turntable that he threw in there in the house, and realizes when he grabs it that the handles broke off of it, that he forgot to fix that. So he packs it under his arm, reaches and gets his record case sitting in the floorboard, and trots into the dance. And comes back out and grabs this big speaker that he built. And, it was made for 3 speakers, but he's seen this little room on the side, so he added 2 more. And he takes it into the hall, and he sets it in the middle of the table. And he sets up his record case right in front of it. And then he sets up his turntable in front of it. And runs back out to the car and gets his big gulp because he hadn't finished it yet, and he wants to make sure that he finishes that drink. He comes in and he starts to set his equipment up and opens up his turntable and picks the cord up that was all folded up right here on top of this part here, and gets the cord out and plugs it in and reaches to plug it into the power supply, and there's no place to plug it in there. It's 20 feet away. He doesn't have an extension cord, so they have to go find a janitor. And, so meanwhile, they're still getting things ready. So he figures, okay, what the heck, I'll go ahead. And runs over and gets him another cup of coffee. And while he's there, he grabs him an extra cup because he realizes that the foot on the bottom of his turntable's broke, and he needs a little extra piece of styrofoam to fix the turntable. So he gets that, and he puts it in there, And he goes and gets his speaker cables or 1 speaker cable, and he gets it out, and it's 2 wires, and he reaches into his record case, and he's got this little clasp, kind of like a clothespin, and he fixes the 2 wires, and he plugs his speaker in, and he plugs it in the back of here, and he's just about ready. Of course, the dancer's out there waiting for him. Gets his records out and grabs his records, and they're just crammed in his record case. There's no sleeves, there's no paperwork. They're just records, And he grabs one of them, throws it on his turntable, and takes the needle and drops it over there, and the needle falls out. What are you going to do? He's not worried. His father's taught him everything he needs to know about square dancing, how to take care of his equipment and everything. He got smart one day, and he just trimmed off the back side of the needle. So all he does is he just turns it over and sticks it back in there, And he drops it. It's a little bit of static, not too bad, but at least he can play it, He starts talking on the microphone. He's this big hum in there. He's, I forgot. I got a short over here. So he sticks his hand on here and just starts to call, having a big time. Now, of course, none of you would do any of that, right? None of us have any kind of problems like that. But this guy's got lots of experience. His dad's taught him everything he needs to know. Needless to say, he might have a few sound problems that night, okay? Just maybe a few of them. But none of us have those kind of problems, right? Good. Okay. As far as sound's concerns, I list the number 1 thing, backup equipment. Number 1 thing. Now, you can go from one extreme to the other. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to have an extra turntable, an extra speaker, extra set of records or whatever, but you need to be prepared for something, okay? But, maybe you don't have Murphy following you around, but I have Murphy that lives at my house, and he goes to every square dance I go to, So think about it, at least have an extra mic cable, okay, an extra speaker cable. It doesn't have to be a fancy speaker cable. It can be just one of these little 3-foot, 1/4-inch on each end Sheila cables you can buy for a couple bucks. Stick it in your case and forget about it, but at least carry one, okay? You should carry an extra microphone. I know nobody drops one, right? Nobody ever drops a microphone, especially if you hand it to the president of the club, okay? You know, you really should have a backup microphone, okay? As far as speakers, it wouldn't hurt, but most likely you're not going to blow one, you know, unless you pull the turntable off on the floor or some dancer accidentally knocks the speaker stand over off the stage, things like that. Of course, that never happens to any of us, okay? But just little things. You know, all of a sudden you see smoke coming out of it. You know, that type of thing. As far as music, if you're playing records, no backup required, right? Nah, of course not. You know, you might accidentally forget to bring your records. You know, but you know, turntable can go out. The platter, the motor can quit turning, but you still got power. What are you going to do? In today's technology, it doesn't cost very much money to have either a small mini disc, a small tape recorder, or a couple of CDs and a very inexpensive CD player. $15. You can have a perfect backup. Keep in mind, we're supposed to be entertaining these people. They pay to come in the door and dance, not to stand and wait for you to try to get things ready or figure out what you forgot or what's broke or what to do. Okay? For $25, you can have a guaranteed backup. Okay? Very, very important. Very important. If you're using mini disc, it's great. Have an extra mini disc or bring a couple of records. If you're not using a turntable, you're using power amp, bring some kind of other source, some kind of other power supply. Buy a 15-watt Radio Shack power amp, something small. Nobody says you have to bring in 3 big boxes or even carry a truckload full with you to the dance. Something small to get you through the catastrophe, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a big embarrassment, and there's only one person to blame, and that's you. They hired you to do the dance. By the way, I forgot to tell you about one other thing about TJ. This was his local Tuesday night club that he calls for every week. You know, does it every week. You know, so, yeah, I forgot to tell you about that. Anyway, if you're using CDs, great. You know, CDs are almost indestructible, almost. Okay, wouldn't hurt to carry a couple extra ones. Wouldn't hurt to carry, again, a mini disc or a couple of records. You know, the little 45 things that spin around. Wouldn't hurt to carry a couple of those. I guess what I'm really saying is it's your responsibility, not the president, not the dancers, not the person that opened the door and let you in. It's your responsibility that that dance is a success. It's yours. Okay? Start breaking things down as far as sound, and I'm going to cover these real quick because you've got the questions and answers and the solutions that we want to talk about. Speaker placement. I mentioned the fact that TJ set a speaker in the middle of the table. A lot of us get lazy about that, but anytime you set a speaker on a table and it's not at the edge, you lose anywhere from 15 to 25% of your sound immediately. Especially if you're on the floor. You don't have a chance. You do not have a chance. Okay? I'm not saying you run out and spend $200-300 for a speaker stand, but get the thing up at least head level with the people. Get it away from sound that's going to hit something and bounce. Give the sound an opportunity to at least get out to the people. Okay? Very important. Second, if you're going to build your own speakers, and more power to you, at least accept the fact that you have to take in consideration ohms and impedance. These types of equipment or any kind of DJ equipment that you use won't just take anything that you throw at it. You've got to give it enough impedance so that it doesn't overheat the system. Okay? Hiltons are typically 4 ohms stable. Do a little math. If you're going to work on something, calculate what you're playing with. Don't just plug it in and expect it to work. It probably will work for a while. Okay? But do a little homework. Again, that's your responsibility. Okay? Microphones, every kind in the world. Don't go buy a mic just because your best buddy says that's the best microphone to get. Spend a little time trying out microphones. Everybody's voice is just a little different. Okay? yes, you probably can get away with your buddy's microphone. You know, fortunately, we have controls called tone controls. They're made to use. They're not made to stay at 12 o'clock, despite what you think. They're really not. Make use of them. Do your homework a little bit. Again, you're responsible for the quality coming out of this speaker. And remember, once it comes out that speaker, you can't do anything else about it. It's gone. Can't change it. You can change it before it gets here. Once it gets here, there's nothing you can do about it. Okay? Hall conditions, let's face it, every hall is different. A gym is not a gym is not a gym. Cafeterias, they're all different. I'm not saying you have to spend 30 minutes and walk around checking everything out. First of all, it's probably empty when you get there, or at least hopefully you're there early enough that it's not full waiting on you. Okay? You know, but you can at least observe the fact that there's a basketball goal right smack in front of you. Had a group call me the other night. We got sound problems in our home. We just don't know how to fix them. I said, okay, what are you doing? Well, we're in a gymnasium, and the caller sets his table up on the stage, and he puts a speaker right there in front, and he's got this basketball goal in his way. I said, well, move it over a little bit. No, he wants to be in the center of the stage. Okay. Got a problem with sound. Their dancers aren't hearing it. I said, well, what kind of dance are you having? Oh, we're averaging about 200 a night. What a great problem to have. Okay? I said, you might want to buy a couple extra speakers. Okay, you know, and they did. But, you know, side note, they got 48 brand new students. I mean, flourishing club. But they didn't want to change what they're doing because they had done their caller has been there 32 years. He's walked in every night with his Hilton 200, his one speaker. He set it up in the middle of the floor every single night his entire life. And it probably worked 90% of the time for 90% of the dances. But now all of a sudden they've got 200 people coming in every dance. Point is, things change. Conditions change. Okay? The hall may not have changed, but the conditions changed out there. You've got to take that in consideration. Okay? If you're used to calling to 5 squares, you know that a very small speaker will do it fine. Okay? They have a special and there's 15 squares there and they're packed to the back of the hall. Your little tiny speaker may not be enough, especially if you've got it sitting on the table. Okay? Conditions change. Take those into consideration. Point again is, you're supposed to be in control. You're responsible for what comes out of there. Okay? And the last one thing I wrote down here was, who's in charge? It's not the president of the club. You are. When you walk into that hall and you've been contracted to do that dance, it's your responsibility. Take that responsibility seriously and do some homework. Okay, that's mainly the stuff that I just want to throw out there. There is some scientific calculations you can use to set up speakers, but we all know that those are typically in a perfect environment, in a soundproof room. And I can't remember the last time I've ever called in one of those. You know, it's been a long time. Okay, so all that's kind of out the window. We're on our own. We somewhat do fly by the seat of our pants, but if we've done our homework with what we have to work with, we can pretty well change things fairly quickly to make the adjustments and provide that dance for them. Okay? Questions, comments? Everybody wake up. In the back. Oh, here. We do have a wireless mic. Greg graciously has already jumped up and pushed the button up. Please state your name, where you're from. We are being taped. I understand certain words will cost you extra money, so be careful. They're up. I just checked it. Both switches? Yeah, there's a mute switch. Da-da-da. I checked out ahead of time. I knew what I had to do. It's not Greg's fault. Greg just happened to be gracious enough to walk up and grab it.
Gil Martin, Round the Lab. Another thing that will help the caller is to develop a good relationship with a round dance cuer. And if something does happen with the equipment, you've got another piece of equipment there ready to go.
Good point. Hopefully, I just talked to a caller the other night. They had this big argument because he didn't walk in with a turntable. And the round dance cure said, how am I going to play my records? And he said, well, on your turntable. Well, I don't bring my turntable to dances. Okay? Whose fault is that? Probably the round dance leader's fault, unless the contract says sound will be provided. Okay? Now, if sound's to be provided, now we're in a gray area. Caller said, hey, I did provide my sound. I got everything I need. Okay? But communication is another key word. Very important.
Let me add something to that point. Greg Anderson, Colorado. I use a Bose PAS, and I use my Hilton MA150 as my mixer, and then run all my sound sources, whether it be MP3 or whatever, through the Hilton. Also, when I work with a round dance cuer who's using records, if he has brought his, for example, Hilton 75, I will run out of his Hilton into my Radio Shack control box, where you press a button for whichever input you want to use, so that I'm directing his source through my Hilton mixer through into the Bose. So he can still do his turntable stuff with his records, and using my mixer and my Bose, then his sound is projected out to the
Good point. The other thing about that is it doesn't require a fancy mixer. Even a little $25, $30 mic mixer will survive and serve the purpose as long as you can get a line in and a line out. It doesn't take a whole lot to hook the two systems together.
David Followay, Makawa, Maui, Hawaii. I just lucked out one day. I walked into Radio Shack, and they're having a super sale on karaoke machines. 2 mics, a thing that would handle about 8 squares with power, and it was $39. And it ran CDs, and it's its own CD player and mic setup.
And you may never use it. He may never have to use that. But he knows it's a backup, and it's a very inexpensive backup. Yes, he has to go to the trouble to carry it to the dance. Doesn't have to take it in, but he's got his backup. He's comfortable. He's now already assured himself of not having to worry about a lot of things that could happen.
Yeah, Jerry Junk from Nebraska, the guy from CALLERLAB makes a good point. I did a lot of dances last summer, 150, 60 dances or so, and in that time, I saw only 2 cuers that did not use records. And I think we need to be aware of that, because if you don't have a turntable or you can't talk to them ahead of time, it really puts them at a disadvantage, and it's very uncomfortable. So I always carry a turntable.
Keith Ferguson, Saratoga, California. It's not electronics, but a few years ago I went into Target store, and they had, I don't know if they still have it, I suspect they do, bought a very inexpensive card table that's kind of a narrow and about 6 feet long, and it fits in my trunk just great. And if I'm going to a hall where I don't know for sure that they have a table available, that's saved me many times. And I recommend get some little simple table that you can put in your trunk and just carry.
Any other questions, comments?
Al Shaw from CALLERLAB. When you're hooking turntables up to your MA150 or whatever, are you coming off the sound on the front of the turntable, depending on which turntable you have? I have a 75, a 205, and a 300 options.
My particular MA150, for those of you who have them, know that it's got 2 inputs on the front for running in your source, whether it's a computer or whatever. Well, I use a Radio Shack multi-junction box, so I'm just using one of those inputs on the front of the MA150 into the junction box, and then I can have 4 appliances hooked to the junction box. So I would come out of the Hilton turntable, tape record probably, the tape record jack, into the input of my junction box. So that's how I'm bypassing. In other words, there doesn't have to be any speaker hooked up to the Hilton at all, because everything's powered by my amp and Bose speaker. So I'm going out of the Hilton. And let me back up a little bit. I wouldn't even have to use, because of the Bose, I don't have to use my Hilton, but it's a mixer that everybody's comfortable with. So especially if I'm working with a cuer, I want him to be comfortable. I don't want him to have to worry about the mixer controls on the Bose. So I'm using my Hilton as a mixer because I'm comfortable with the bass treble volume controls and just using the junction box to run the Quirks turntable into the junction box, therefore into the Hilton onto the Bose. And where am I coming out of the Hilton? Probably out of the tape record.
There's several different ways. Depends
Depending
on the model.
Yeah.
Yeah. There, for example, like on the 70, this is a 75A. Okay, I personally would come out. Well, in this case, if he wants to pick up the mic and the music, you're forced to come out of the back. Okay, if you're only trying to pick up music and working the mic off the MA150, then you come out the front because the front where it says tape music, it's ins and outs. Okay, any of the newer equipment, any of the C models, everything is built in front. Okay, a lot of the older models, it's up behind the tone arm. Okay, so there again, you're going to have to kind of check your equipment. One of the points that Al, I think, is trying to make is if you're working with somebody, you might have to spend a little extra time. Okay, first of all, everybody has to be comfortable with the equipment or there's going to be problems. Okay, in the case of Greg, he knows how his system's set up and he knows how to plug somebody else's system into it. All he needs to tell them is, your equipment's going to operate just like you normally do. All I've done is put you over here so that we're coming out the system. Okay? And so they don't have to be retrained on how to twist his knobs. They're turning theirs. That's very important.
I think maybe you've just answered a question that I was going to pose, and that is I get to a lot of dances where the round dance cuer, and I'm glad to get somebody from Round Lab because I haven't got somebody to talk to and think about these things. A lot of times round dance cuer doesn't have nearly the kind of speakers that they should have to cover the floor. You know, I've got a setup that I intend for everybody to hear every word it's said, and the round dance cuers a lot of times are saying, everybody's got to be quiet so they can hear. Well, that's because they don't have the sound equipment to project it. But if I would take their output, run it into my set, then they can still run everything out of their set, and I've still got the kind of coverage so the round dancers can hear. And I'm realizing I'm a lot more sensitive to that because I've got hearing aids stuck in my ears now, and I don't hear as well as I used to. So when I'm out there round dancing, I'm a real good measure for what the average round dancer probably is hearing. So that's a new idea.
For purposes of the recording, that mysterious individual was Elmer Claycomb from Prescott City, Arizona? Prescott Valley. He may not hear as well, but he still sounds marvelous as he always has.
One of the things that he brought up, he was talking about being able to hear. I know a lot of callers are starting to struggle just a little bit on hearing because they've had this speaker blaring in their ear for all those years. And I've seen a lot of callers, and we get a lot of phone calls about monitors today. Monitors are great if they're used properly. Now, to me, the misuse of a monitor is he's plugged it into the other channel, he's got separate controls, and he's cranked that baby for him to hear right here, and it has nothing to do with the sound coming out of the main speakers. He's great, man. He's got it made. They're still struggling out there. Okay? So if you're going to use a monitor, spend some time on how to use it, make it work for both the dancers and you.
Paul Hansey from Tennessee. Tom, give us some thoughts about since we're getting into the hard of hearing situation range with people now, give us some what's available in the marketplace for club callers to use or the clubs to buy in terms of what they can now provide for hard of hearing.
Okay. Along with that, and granted, the callers are almost getting in the same boat. I had a caller contact me. He developed a system to where he's got an earbud in his own ear from everything coming out the speaker. He needed that much help. He had to hear it right here. And so, we developed a little wireless system and an earbud, and he puts it in, and he hears exactly what's coming out. Works real well. As far as the dancers, there's 3 or 4 brands out there. The leading brands are still Williams Sound and Telex. Those are the 2 major brands for hearing enhancement. Yes, it's fairly expensive, okay, for an individual to buy it. But I'm here to tell you, we get the calls week in, week out that saved my dancing career. Okay, we've got to keep those people in mind. Yes, it's about $800 to $1,000 to buy a complete system. We're talking about the transmitter and 4 receivers or what have you. If the clubs can share it, if associations can share it, if the dancers can get together and share it, it's not too bad. I was at a national convention one time, and we were setting up sound, and we provided hearing enhancement in the halls. And this lady came up to me in tears. She was absolutely in tears. They were on their way home. They've had enough. They're leaving. Her husband could not hear anything going on. We gave him one of the belt packs. They danced the entire weekend. I thought that lady was going to fall in love with me. I mean, it was just, it's that important. It's that important that they do have to hear. They have to distinguish between the music and the vocals. Okay, just buying the hearing enhancement and letting them hook it up, or you hook it up, and if you hook it in the front and give them everything, they're no better off. If they think they want that, try to convince them that they only want voice. Do your best. Get them to at least try it. Voice only. The human ear is going to pick up enough vibrations, enough of the music to dance. They've got to have that vocal right in their ear, though.
Tom, Jerry Junk again. For a way for a club to afford having hearing enhancement, or for a caller to afford it, simply put a 50-50 pot together for a month and say all this money goes to buy a Williams sound enhancement, either for the caller to provide or for the club, and everybody will contribute, and in a month's time, couple of dances, you'll have enough money to buy one.
And if you keep 1 or 2 couples in the activity, it will pay for itself in no time. You know, that 1 or 2 couples is very, very important to us.
Scott Pierce from California. I understand that recently they've developed some problems with the hearing with the Williams as far as getting a hum or some feedback when you try to hook them up. Is there a quick fix for that?
I've not heard that. I'm a Williams Sound rep and dealer. I've not been involved in any hum problems. It might be a localized situation. I know they have eliminated channel E in their new systems, which I have given them several phone calls about, because the square dance world typically uses channel E. They're going to be around for a long time, and you can switch any of your systems to channel E, and the new ones you can switch them. They aren't set up that way. But as far as hum, I haven't heard anything at all. Be glad to help anybody, or at least find out what's going on. I just need no more information. Okay.
I'm sorry, Jerry Junk again. I have, and it's on the 500s. My 500, and all I had to do to eliminate it was plug my Williams sound system into another electrical socket. That takes care of it.
So it's picking up the 60 cycle hum.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. One of the things, speaking of the hums and what have you, with today's technology, keep in mind that CD players, wireless systems give off frequencies. Sometimes they're not compatible. It's very often that a CD player and or a mini disc and a wireless system sitting side by side plugged into the same electrical box will give you a fit. 25-foot extension cord will solve that problem.
We had that type of problem yesterday. This is Greg Anderson. At our Beginner Party Leader Seminar, we were getting a high-pitched sound coming out of the speaker, and we were testing everything. We unplugged all the connector cords from the device to the Hilton, and none of those resolved it. We finally figured out about a half hour into the program that it was the power cable for the laptop that was causing it. So we just unplugged it and went to battery, and we're fine.
Yeah, keep in mind, when turntables were invented, even with the technology that they're being improved yearly, they were not designed for all these extra inputs. Heaven forbid a computer, okay? They weren't designed. And the other thing is, if you're going to plug a mini disc, a CD player, a laptop, 2 or 3 wirelesses, that's sucking a lot of juice out of this baby, okay? It can only work so good and be so efficient. Be kind to it, okay? I know it's a little more trouble to unplug a couple of things when you're not using them, but be conscious of what you're doing to the system. I mean, you're asking a lot out of this thing. And, you know, even if you buy a professional DJ piece of equipment, rack mounted and everything put together, it can only handle so much. Okay?
Along those same lines, back in my young and foolish days when I was trying to hook up multiple devices, I was using a whole bunch of Y cables. and it was indeed a drain on the system, and the system conked off at one point. I have not had that problem since I switched to something like a Radio Shack junction box where you have several connection points, and then you just press the button for whichever device that you're going to use at that point in time.
And basically what he's doing is he's not turning the power off. He's not probably even turning the signal off, but he's turning the input off. That's important. It's just like the wireless microphone. It's got the mute switch on it. We're not losing the signal, but we're eliminating the pops. We're eliminating interference coming in. Speaking of interference, I know they've done this. In my experience, 99.9% of the time, these are useless. Don't even bother to open them up. You're going to break them off. These things are designed for our distances never to be opened up. Okay, talking about the antennas on the wireless system, okay? You know, unless you want to hang flags on them or something like that, they really serve no purpose in our activity. None. Zero. The old telex systems did require the antennas to be hooked on, some kind of grounding effect. But you didn't have to raise them, but you did have to plug them in. Okay? But you really don't need these things. You know, the other thing is, if I do this and I close this up, I've probably eliminated another 90% chance of any signal coming in. I like that. Okay.
Paul Hensey again from Tennessee. On the Williams equipment, I use this, just started this year. I realized we had some ego problems with some of the older. For the tape, he was pushing down the top of the antennas to get interference. But I realized we had about 6 to 8 of the men that were hard to admit that they were getting hard of hearing. So I asked, just by a show of hands, would they meet me up front? And I did, walked them up there, found out the receivers, Tom, correct me here, about $110, 100 and thereabouts for the receiver. And I got all the guys to agree that they would buy the receivers. Now, that's the first part. Second part, we went over to Radio Shack and bought a $15 headset, plugged it into this with a little adapter. And these guys now come to the dance. And if they see anybody that's hard of hearing, they'll walk up and tap on the shoulder and say, hey, go up and see so and so forth. He's got an extra set for you. And now they're not afraid to use them, and that's the first people that will advertise for it.
One of the nice things about the hearing enhancement systems today is you're not limited to an earbud. They do have the headphones. They even have one you can wear around your collar for people that just can't stand to have anything on their head. They literally put it over like a necklace, picks up everything. If they're wearing hearing aids, they can adjust for those. Don't have to take them out. They've got the new earpieces that fit real nice over the ear, and the main sounds coming directly on their ear. I encourage the dancers not to use headphones. Part of that is I want them to pick up some of the environment sound. Not all of it, but I want them to pick up some of the environment sound. You know, the other thing is it's kind of hard to find out what your corner's saying to you if you got these things locked on. Okay, so I really encourage only one, but there are people that have to have both.
Patty Green, Monroe, North Carolina. I have a question about power. These days you do a lot of dances in all different kinds of buildings, and some of them are old school buildings. And every once in a while I get in a building where if it's wired badly or something going on, and you get that hum in your system that no matter what you do, you can't get rid of. You can't go to another plug. You know the plug's bad by looking at it. It's got to be something that's coming from the wall. Is there something that you can get to have in your box to try to get rid of that interference?
Two things real quick. One's a little more expensive than the other one. One, most of the time, is a power strip that has the surge protectors in it. You know, we think of surge protectors as being for electrical impulses and what have you. Well, some of them are really, really wired up nice, and they let the circuitry go through and come back out and eliminate a lot of the hum. The other thing is Hilton makes a 60-cycle hum eliminator. That's a non-technical term, but I think it's like, don't quote me, somewhere around $50 or whatever, but it intercepts between there and your system and takes care of that. Yeah.
I was going to say Richard Berry from Cortez, Colorado now, formerly from Moab, Utah. And for those of you who have a national convention in your state, when they set up that 501c deferred thing for the income tax thing, it is legal to use those funds to buy these Williams sound systems. And that's what they do in Utah. Anybody, any club in the state of Utah that wants one, all they have to do is apply to the state, and they will be granted the money or granted the product. So those of you setting up these things might want to think about that.
One of the things along those lines, be careful of, sometimes it's a responsibility of the facility. And sometimes the facility likes to shirk off those responsibilities and say, well, you're renting the hall, it's your responsibility. Okay? So like if you go in the movie theater, you may not know that, but if you go in the movie theater and you want one, they have to provide you a hearing enhancement. If you want one. I've yet to be in a theater yet where it wasn't too loud. But, you know, they, by law, they do have to provide you one if you want one. Other questions, comments, concerns? A couple of notes about national conventions. You brought that up. We've done several over the years, and there again, the situations, every hall is different. Typically, keep in mind, if you're going to have hearing enhancement systems of those, you do need separate channels for the halls, especially if they're adjoining, you know, back to back, what have you. The worst thing you can have is the round dance cure coming over the speakers while the caller is trying to call. Those type of things. They're fairly easy to switch. The old style has little diff switches. You change them out. The new styles have flip buttons. If you're getting dancers to buy this type of equipment today, encourage them to buy the 4-channel. It's only like $20-25 more. They can buy the 4-channel, and they're protected for almost anywhere they'd ever go in the entire United States. It's not that expensive. So, you know, keep in mind those things.
Bo Byerly from North Carolina. My backup for my full yak is a half yak. But I have been told by other callers that never to plug them up at the same time. Now, I haven't done that. I haven't had to. But I was just wondering if there are any other people that have run across that same thing, or am I being told something that's a myth?
No, you can plug up a full yak and a half yak. Now, you just don't plug them all in and be done with it. Obviously, you got a different ohmage in a full yak versus a half yak, but you can't. And the other thing is, how are you plugging them into it? Are you plugging the full yak over here and the half yak over here? Are you trying to plug the full yak and a half yak both in this one side? Or are you using a series Y, parallel Y? And I don't mean to complicate it, but you have to keep up with your impedance. Okay, you can plug it all in. It'll come on. It'll probably run for a tip or two. Okay, you know, but you can't. What you're talking about is the myth that you can never have an odd number. Sure you can. You can have an odd number of speakers. We don't encourage you to have a yak and a Hilton and a Keltone and a Bose all hooked into the same system. You can, as long as you understand what the inputs and the outputs of each one of them are, and you hook it up accordingly. There's nothing wrong with that. Along with the speakers, part of our problem today is you typically, I won't say it's a problem, the result is we're buying a speaker to take care of our hall. That's great if you never travel, if you never have to go call for somebody else. You know, the new Bose speakers are coming out, and pretty soon you're going to be able to buy one about the size of your hand, and it'll do your average dance hall. Don't try to take that to a gymnasium. Yeah, it looks great. Hey, I got this little speaker, and that's what they're going to hear in the back of the hall. That's all they're going to hear. They're not designed for throw. Okay, be conscious of that. But they probably work great in your small club, your small dance halls, your workshop places, and what have you. Be conscious of that. That doesn't mean you have to blare it out, but a good rule of thumb is if you're running the knob at 12 o'clock, it probably isn't right. Might be just a little excessive. Any other questions? Everybody's got everything solved. Great.
talk about the differences between an MP3 file, a MIDI disc player, and a CD player, and which one's going to give us the best sound.
Okay, you mentioned
Gil
everything.
Gil Martin. Round
You mentioned everything's digital, so you're probably going to get the same sound, assuming you recorded it the same way and all of it. Which brings me to something. We have the tendency to record a record, or I'll say some people have the tendency to record a record either to an MP3 player, into their computer, onto a CD, and go use it. You're going to get the same exact sound you got off the record. Maybe a little bit of enhancement, but not much, unless you do your work, your homework. You got to clean that thing up. Just because you copied it doesn't mean it's really better. Okay? It might be a little bit better. We have this, and I'm going to, Chris will probably correct me, maybe. We have this, this belief that if we copy a record onto a CD, we now have digital sound. Come on, people. No. We have a digital format, but we don't have digital sound. Okay. I think what you're alluding to is waveform better than an MP3 form? No. It's just compressed. Okay. It'll still give you the same sound. One of the things we have to be careful of is if you've recorded your music onto an MP3 format, whether it be a flash drive or whatever, and you play it in your system, it may not sound the same way in my MP3 player for two reasons. Mine may be set up different. My amplifier may be set up different. Okay, I've run into several situations where they've recorded their music so hot, so loud, no matter what knob I twist, I can't improve it. And that's what we really think we can do. We think, just as long as we record it, we can fix it over here. It's too late to fix it over here. You got to fix it coming in, or at least fix it once it's in the computer and do your homework on the software and what have you, and take care of it there. You can't take care of it on these knobs. That's not the place to take care of it. Okay, you've got to fix it over here. But correct me if I'm wrong. As far as an MP3, a CD, the quality is pretty much the same. Okay, it's what you put in there. It's the old story: garbage in, garbage out. Okay, you've got to take care of it. You know, I did. I had a little car, copied all of his music onto CDs. Man, I'm really ready. Put them on. They sounded as scratchy as his records in his record case. And I thought, wow, he really helped himself out.
Okay, Cynthia Schrader from Wisconsin. I use a simple CD player added to my system, and I was finding that I had a little trouble with the sound being loud enough. And my solution was to plug it into the second microphone input so that it would have a separate, the separate volume control, and I didn't have to readjust my original microphone control to adjust the music, because the music was only able to be increased by using my microphone control. So that way my music was better. I don't know if I'm doing it right.
You got extremely lucky. I would not recommend anyone. I would not recommend anyone to plug anything but a microphone into a microphone input. Really and truly. You've lost the entire range to control your music. You really got lucky. But if it worked, that's okay. But you've really lost the entire range of your music.
Greg Anderson again. The advantage of sets like the Hilton MA150 is that it has input controls. I'm not sure the technical terminology for it. On the front panel, little tiny knobs on the front panel that will compensate for a weak signal. So you go into the input of the MA150. In fact, with the two inputs, if you plugged your CD player into one and another device into the other, they could be set at different levels to compensate for a weak signal coming from your device, and that can get around that problem.
Yeah, along those lines, and again, it depends on what amplifier you're using. Let's take, for example, the 75, the smaller units where you have 2 mic inputs, but you only have 1 volume control. I've seen nightmares where you have a wireless system and a regular mic. They spend all night long trying to adjust those things, okay? You need to take care of that ahead of time. And the easiest solution, if you're using a wireless and a regular mic, the easiest solution is fix this thing first. Adjust it to your volume. I usually turn it wide open, okay? And then I've got more control over here. You know, the worst thing you do is you're out there on the floor using your wireless, you walk up and you grab this thing and you blow everybody out. Happens all the time, okay? Same way with MP3 players, same way with CD players. You've got these great inputs over here, but if you didn't make that adjustment and you go from a record to a CD or an MP3 player, there's a good chance you're going to blow somebody's hair off, okay?
Along that line, Ron Counts, Colorado Springs. The fact that you have a 1/4-inch phone plug in your hand, you better know what the other end is plugged into. One night, I was in the process of setting up, and we have some female 1/4-inch jacks underneath the countertop, and I was going to hook a speaker into there, and I was also in the process of hooking up the wireless microphone, which has a 1/4-inch input. A dancer came up and started talking to me, and I plugged a speaker line out jack into a microphone jack, and I converted a Hilton 500 from a non-smoking machine to a smoking machine at a cost of about $450. So when you're dealing with things like that, line does not go into microphone without a disaster occurring.
Now, a real cheap piece of masking tape with a few markings on it will save you a whole bunch of money. Marking things really, really are important.
You actually set up my question I was going to ask. One of the things Hilton recommends, at least on the 300, is if you want to use a slave amplifier, which I do use for a dance that I sound for. We have an outdoor dance hall that we set up speakers outside, and that way I have separate controls, so I can go out and adjust the volume for the outside speaker and keep the same mix of voice and music that the caller in the main hall is using. And he recommends taking the line out from the main amplifier and putting it into a microphone input on the slave, but with the tone control, I believe it's full bass. I always have to look it up. He also says don't do this if you have more than a certain length of cable between the two. And I found out last year that he knew what he was talking about when he said that. I had a much different hall, and I tried running a much longer cable, and I got so much hum outside you couldn't hear it. And he suggests using some impedance matching transformers. I was wondering, are those things really readily available, or what do you recommend?
Sure, you can get those at Radio Shack for about $12. Yeah, they're fairly inexpensive. There again, do your homework. Just because you plug one up. Before you, how long do we go? I don't want to keep everybody through lunch. 1/4 till? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, I don't want to cut anybody off at the same time. I didn't want to.
Okay, I'm Stu Shacklet from the Kentucky Dance Foundation, and I've approached Tommy with this before, and I was hoping that someone in the room might have an answer to this problem. I also talked to Chris about it earlier, but I'm finding that in making recordings in the computer from music that I've put together, I record, I have a CD, and I put the CD on a little cheap disc player that I've got there, and it plays it beautifully, 15 tracks, no problem, bling, 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 all 15 tracks. And I take it and put it on my Jiminy, and the Jiminy will play the first 4 tracks, but it won't play anything after that. I take the same CD and put it on another CD player, and it plays all 15 tracks. And it just so happened it put me in a bind. I was at a dance teaching German, French, and some Spanish, and it played the German dances, but it wouldn't play the French, and maybe don't speak French and Spanish, I don't know. But anyhow, it played the first 4 tunes, but it wouldn't play the rest of them.
Yeah, that CD player, no hablo español. What happens, and I talked to Stu about this, typically the first thing the CD player has to do is read the table of contents. Okay. Sometimes it'll read it all the way through. Sometimes it'll only read tracks 1 through whatever. The problem we've run into is kind of like turntables, in so much that the early days we were recording at 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x. Today we're up to what, 52, 58? I think there's new CDs out there doing 60 or whatever. The CD players are not capable of playing that. If you'll read the fine print, a lot of the CD players will say guaranteed to read a maximum of 4x. Now, that doesn't mean it won't read 1 at 52x. It's a good chance it will, okay? But it's not guaranteed to. And Stu's running the same situation all of us have. I'll burn CDs, and they play through everything I want to, and I put them in my truck on my way home, and it just sits there and does nothing. Won't even read the contents. I just played it before I left the office. Some of the players will not read. It's unfortunately not like records. You can't take it out and spit on it and put it back in. But the next time it might read it. There is no perfect solution for that other than if you really, really 100% burn 2 copies or burn it at a slower speed. But that's not a 100% guarantee. It's, again, one of those things you're going to have to check out.
Yeah, Cynthia Schrader from Wisconsin. I found I have the same problem if you're not careful what you're playing it on, that the equipment you're using can read all formats, WAV, MP3s, and CD type formats. Some automobile equipment does not read MP3s unless it's says so, or that you're aware that your vehicle can do that, because I've copied things on the computer and it won't play in the vehicle, but it'll play everywhere else if the equipment is made to do that.
Yeah, you have to be careful copying stuff out of CD players anyway, or out of computers anyway. It doesn't always have to burn the certain wave format that you're accustomed to. Okay, be careful. If you look down in there and ask you for selection, there's as many as 10 different wave formats that you can copy that CD, that music. Most of your players won't play any of them but one. So be careful of that. Speaking of equipment, let's talk about a couple of things. Earlier we had weakness in equipment. Signal boosters are great. Okay, very, very neat to have, especially for the older type equipment. It's a very inexpensive, well, I shouldn't say inexpensive. Yeah, it's fairly inexpensive in our industry. It is. Little box, couple of cords coming out. You can get in mono or stereo. A nice range to give you. It will compensate for your inability to record properly in a lot of cases. Okay, $50, $60, you can have one of those things. Put it in your case. You may not need it on your set, but guess what? You go over and call with Joe next week, and he's got an old 300, and your mini disc or your laptop just ain't enough to go through there. Your responsibility. Have that. Be prepared. His input's not an 1/8 inch. It's RCA. Whose responsibility? Yours. Be prepared. If you're going to use newer technology, it's your responsibility to have the stuff that works. If you use records, hey, it's easy. Bring your records. That's your responsibility. Okay? Do that. Today's technology is changing. Most of you got a computer at home, I would assume. If you bought it a year ago, it's outdated. It's the same way with some of the equipment we're using today. The MP3 players are phenomenal. The mini disc, what few are still left, now have the HIMD. You can record an entire gig of music on one disc. 72 hours worth of music. Now, sounds great. Except that if you've got that in your shirt pocket and you go down to Joe's Club next Saturday and he asks you to call a tip and he's using mini disc, you grab your mini disc and throw it in there, ain't going to work. He's got the old style mini disc. Okay? Recorded different speeds. Won't play. He can come down to your club, his will work. Okay? Be conscious of the technology that you're using. Be conscious of the MP3 players, the flash drives you're using, the USB ports that you're working with. Got to be you've got to do some homework to make those things work efficiently for you. Okay? In the laptop computers, we're hearing, as good as they are, we're hearing horror stories about drives going down, about it not powering up fast enough, or when it does power up, it does something to the runs through the speakers. Not sure what that is yet. I haven't done enough homework on it. I don't use a laptop in my dances. I'm going to study up so I can have some answers. But you've got to be conscious of those things. Okay. There again, don't be to the point where you walk up with your laptop and expect them to have a plug-in, a power supply for your laptop. Just a while ago, a guy come up to me. He's got this laptop and wanted to know if I had my power supply. I thought he wanted to charge his up. I never seen the back power supply in my entire life on that computer. It's like 9 pins back there. I just couldn't imagine. Okay, now, yeah, it's unfortunate he left it at home. He's out of luck until he gets back home. He's out of luck. Yeah.
I am Barry Clasper from Toronto, Canada. I use a laptop all the time, and I found that as I was going from place to place, particularly on the 75s, that if you plugged into the tape input jack that's on the front, I was getting really mixed results. Sometimes it would work great, other times it would be really weak. Sometimes I could compensate with the Hilton booster that you were talking about. But it was really puzzling me, and sometimes I just got crappy sound, and there was nothing much I could do about it. And I was moaning about this one day to Sandy Bryant, and she said, well, I always plug into the monitor music in the back, which sounded really bizarre to me, because I thought that's an output, right? So plugging your computer into that shouldn't make any sense. But I tried it. It works great, and it's much more consistent than what you get on the front. So I'm just wondering, A, is that dangerous? Is there a chance they're going to blow something up eventually by doing that? And B, why does it work at all?
Okay, there again, I would check with Hilton, but I know the front plugs are ins and outs. I wouldn't be that 100% to say that the back ones are. It sounds like that one is, but that might change from model and from year to year to year. Okay, keep in mind, not faulting Hilton. They're doing great work for what we're trying to do today, but that 75 was not designed to put anything in there, really and truly. It was designed if you want to record a tape. Remember those cassette tapes? Remember those reel-to-reels? It was designed to pick up that stuff so that you could practice with and listen to yourself and critique and what have you. It wasn't designed for a digital input or output. It wasn't designed for that. Okay.
I loaned my set to my son, Martin Mallard, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Anyways, it came back. My computer had no board at all. And it had worked for me. I had used it. We had the same model computer. But I lost my whole sound card. It was cheaper to buy a new computer than it was to repair it. So you can't trust that as an output for a computer or an input. If you're going to use that low level, be darn careful. To change the subject, you were talking earlier about the hearing assists. How many of you have done a large dance with, say, 40 or 50 squares and had hearing assist on it? How many of you have noticed that the hearing-assisted people seem to dance in the back of the hall? And you know what happens? You give them voice only. You say element left, and that back half of the floor is a second ahead of everybody else on the floor. And they're out of sync with the music.
Solutions?
Only call small dances.
Yeah. Okay. Of course, that's a simple one. First, it's no different than newer dancers. Okay. Plead with them, beg with them, take them by the hand, whatever you have to do. Remember, it's your responsibility. They have a good experience at your dance. Those folks need to dance up front. But they need to dance up front.
Bo Byerly from North Carolina. Getting back to recording music onto CDs. This is something that we found out in our office. If you use the RW CDs, which are rewritable, they are not as stable as the R CDs, which you can only use to record once until you fill it up. So if you're going to record a disc that you're going to use over and over for 40, 50 dances or something like that, use the R disc, not the RW, because you don't want to be at a dance and all of a sudden have it go.
And there again, it depends on brands too. You can buy a very, very quality RW and be okay. It's really no different than the old days of cassette tapes. Remember, we used to erase and record and erase and record and erase and record, and eventually you erase the tape itself. Okay.
Dennis Young from Southern California. Somebody told me once there are music or audio CDs as opposed to using a digital CD. Can you address that?
Sure. Computers will use anything, literally. If it's a CD, it's going to use it. Okay. Typically, a standalone CD recorder requires a digital CDR, and it'll say on there, consumer use, music only. Most of your other CDRs will say data, okay? Because really and truly, music, when it's put onto a CD, is data. Whoa. Everybody thinks it's digital sound. It's data, okay? And so the computer can handle any of it, but your standalone recorders cannot, okay? The other thing is they've claimed that they've built in licensing and other little things in there to make it digitally proper to use, but they are different. Now, the digitally CDRs will work great in computers. It's going to cost you a couple bucks more per disc, okay? But the way the computer's set up, since it's trying to read data, you can use a cheap CDR and usually get away with it most of the time. Okay, we're running out of time. You guys have been great. I appreciate you coming. If you have any questions, drop by the booth. I did want to tell you one more thing. If you have technical questions as far as the Hiltons, there is nobody better than calling Hilton themselves and asking the question before you plug it up and try it out. Believe me, they probably have done everything to that piece of equipment possible. So I really encourage you to talk to them. Thanks, everybody.